break-even point of 2043. When people heard that, there were questions raised. Speak to the people of Wisconsin. How is that a good deal when we won't break even on this until 2043?
Well, I think you have to step back and just look at the bigger picture here. We're talking about 13,000 high-paying, family-supporting jobs in Wisconsin. That's an average salary that we're projecting of just shy of $54,000. And that's just the direct jobs that we're talking about. Then we're going to have the indirect and the induced jobs across the whole state. You're going to have a supply chain. This is creating a whole new high-tech manufacturing ecosystem in the state of Wisconsin that not only hasn't existed in the state of Wisconsin, it has not existed in the United States. So there are going to be benefits beyond what was just in that report that are very hard to quantify using kind of historic models when you're looking at something of this magnitude that is so transformative, creating an ecosystem for high-tech manufacturing right here in Wisconsin.
Secretary Hogan, let me follow up on something Secretary Neitzel just said. He said 13,000 jobs. President Trump, when this was announced, said 3,000 jobs with the potential. There are people in the state legislature who are a bit concerned about just exactly how many jobs will be created and by when. Is there language in the legislation or in the deal that says X number of jobs will be created by this date, therefore you get state taxpayer dollars?
Mike, there's nothing in the legislation around that, and we're currently negotiating the contract with the company, so we'll be going through that process as we talk about it. But our understanding with the company is $10 billion investment in the state of Wisconsin, 13,000 jobs, and we will provide $2.85 billion in tax credits to the company.
Will there at some point, do you anticipate, be language that will spell out job creation goals and target dates for those goals?
Yes. In any of our contracts that we sign with enterprise zones, which would be the larger ones like an Amazon, for example, there are guideposts that we establish within the terms of the contract. How much money are they going to spend over a period of time? How are they going to employ people over a period of time? And we will incorporate that based on the company's plans and their commitment to get to that 13,000 employee level.
But here again, the way we set this up is that the company has to invest dollars or hire employees before they get a dime of state incentive money. So it is a pay-as-they-grow, performance-based incentive.
Are you concerned at all about who might be working there? For example, there have been some people in the Assembly who said, we'd like to see language that would seek to have Foxconn give preference to Wisconsin workers and Wisconsin vendors. Could that ultimately be part of the final deal?
Well, what we've seen in working with the company, and Mark can comment on this too, is that they are very committed to being here in Wisconsin. They are very committed to being a part of the Wisconsin business community. They want to make this ecosystem good for the whole state. We've already seen that where they've entered into a memorandum of understanding with Rockwell right here in Milwaukee, and also with the ginseng growers up in the north central part of the state. So they are looking to be an integral part of the Wisconsin business community.
But are there guarantees, or do you expect there will be guarantees of the percentage, for example, of Wisconsin workers who would be employed at this new plant?
Well, I think just the reality is that there are going to be, if you look at other large employers in the Racine-Kenosha area, usually about 90 to 95% of those employees live in Wisconsin. So I think here again, we are very committed, the company is very committed to making sure that there's work for all Wisconsin companies, looking at the supply chain, both during construction and then for employment after the plant is up and running.
Just to follow up on that, the reason Foxconn is coming to the state of Wisconsin are all of the things, the pro-business legislation that has been passed over the last 6 to 7 years. We wouldn't be in this position if we didn't have right to work, for example. We wouldn't be on that list of site selectors looking at Wisconsin as a possible location. And so to answer your question about language in the legislation or language in the contract, we wouldn't look to do that because that really would run counter to the pro-business policies that have been incorporated in the state.
Do you think, though, that you would be protecting taxpayers by insisting on that language?
People that work in the state of Wisconsin pay taxes to Wisconsin. So one of the misnomers that's out there is that Illinois residents that work in Wisconsin don't pay taxes in Wisconsin. That's not true. They do pay taxes in Wisconsin. Clearly, we want them to live in Wisconsin, But when you're talking about 10,000 construction jobs, you're talking about 13,000 ongoing jobs. The fact of the matter is we will have to recruit from outside of Wisconsin. And our goal, our intent, clearly, is to have those people work and live in Wisconsin.
Secretary Neitzel, what do you say to critics of this deal who worry about the environment? They say, we're giving Foxconn a lot of preferential treatment here. They don't have to abide by some of the same rules that other companies have to abide by. What's your response to that?
Well, first of all, here again, that's kind of a misnomer.
In what sense?
Well, they will still have to meet every requirement for air, water, hazardous waste, and solid waste. All we're doing is streamlining some of the upfront paperwork.
Like a DNR, environmental impact statement, they won't have to do.
Correct. They won't have to do it, but that doesn't relieve them from anything as far as meeting all the environmental obligations that are in the statute. Also, when on the wetlands issue, they will still be subject to federal wetlands regulation, and on the state wetlands, if there's any wetlands that have to be filled in, they have to replace those at a ratio of 2 acres for every 1 acre that is filled in, which is actually higher than the current law, which says 1.2 to 1.
Let's talk about amendments to this legislation. How many amendments is Foxconn willing to I don't want to say allow, but how many would they be comfortable with? How much wiggle room do you have on the memorandum that was negotiated?
I think there's a general understanding of what's important to the company, and we've worked with the assembly leaders, and yesterday we met with the Senate, or the Republican caucus in the Senate. I think they understand what's important to the company, and so I'm going to let them work through their gyrations on it. But we have a clear understanding. We've had great communications with the company from day one. We brought the legislative leadership on both sides of the aisle into this conversation back the first week of June when the governor first went on the trip to Japan.
Let me ask a question you hear often with Foxconn. They'll say promises have been made before but haven't been kept. You hear about Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, promise of a $40 million plant. You hear about something that's overseas where also a plant did not get built. You hear that they failed to keep promises. What's your response to that, Secretary? Does it give you any pause?
Well, we ask them that question directly, right? I mean, that's part of our due diligence, too, on the behalf of the taxpayers of Wisconsin. And what the situation was in Pennsylvania was that there was a change of administration in Pennsylvania, and there was a desire to maybe get a different, negotiate a different deal than what was negotiated. So that's what happened there. The other example that's brought up a lot is in Brazil. And what happened in Brazil, of course, you had the president there who was ultimately impeached. So that business climate changed also. It goes back to what Secretary Hogan said. We've had now 6 solid years of an improved business climate, where we're now, Site Selector magazine, I believe, ranked us as one of the top states in the country. So it's that continuity, it's that consistency of purpose that the state has, and so we are not worried at all about that eventuality.
Yeah, you don't think that that's something that they could walk away from?
Mike, if you've seen the commitment that we've seen on behalf of the company, I mean, they've had a number of high-level executives here for long periods of time. They've had a number of people on the ground. They have already made a commitment to being here in Wisconsin. I referenced the MOUs they've already signed. They're already talking to a number of other businesses about relationships they can have. So we feel they are extremely committed to being here in Wisconsin.
Secretary, you want to address that on whether or not they are good to their word on the development of these kinds of facilities?
Absolutely, I have no doubt. I've been involved since the first meeting in the White House on April 28th, and within a week, there were people that were coming from Foxconn to Wisconsin. 2 weeks after that date, they had 30 or 35 people in the state working with our local economic development organizations along with industry and academic leaders. And every step of the way, they have committed time, they have committed people, they have committed resources to looking at Wisconsin as the place they want to be.
This is a complex deal, and yet it'll probably be finalized by September 30th. In fact, the governor would like to have this done by Labor Day. Why the urgency? Why do you feel that this needs to get done right now?
Well, you know, the company wants to get manufacturing in Wisconsin, in North America, as soon as possible. You know, we are trying to accommodate a schedule that goes on kind of international business timetables. We have to be responsive to that. The company here again wants to put 13,000 jobs in Wisconsin that are going to pay an average of $54,000 plus benefits. My question is, why would we wait? We've had a very transparent process. We've, as Mark said, we've been talking with the leadership in both houses, on both sides of the aisle, since June. We've been fully open with what's in the package, what's in the MOU, what we're looking at. So I think it's just the fact that they want to get going, so we want to get going, so this transformational deal can start impacting in a positive way the state and the citizens of the state of Wisconsin.
So would your hope be by Labor Day you'd like to see both the Assembly and the Senate vote on this?
We'd like to done as soon as possible. We'd like to get everything wrapped up by the end of September. We need the legislation before we can finish and sign the final contract. So somewhere around Labor Day would be a great time period.
And you met with the Republican caucus in the Senate the other day. What was the reaction? Because there have been some people, at least privately, had said they had some questions about the deal. What did you take away from that meeting?
There were great questions. There was very good support in the meeting. Senator Fitzgerald was quoted coming out of the meeting saying it was an outstanding 2 hours, and I would put it the same way.
Let me just walk through one other part of this deal so the people at home truly understand when we talk about the tax incentives, how this works. We saw numbers from the Legislative Fiscal Bureau, and they say that, you know, in 2024 or something like that, the state is paying Foxconn $312 million. Those are big numbers. How does that work? Is that truly state taxpayer dollars? Help us better understand what we're talking about as part of this deal.
So not to get too much into the weeds, but what will happen is, as Scott said before, not a dollar of taxpayer money goes out before the company spends money. So they will start the process of hiring people. They will start the process of building the plant. At the end of each year, they will submit the information on the wages paid and also the capital expenditures incurred. We'll verify that information, and then we certify it, and we give them a certification, which they then turn over to the Department of Revenue for either crediting against their taxes, or they will receive what's called a refundable tax, or refundable credit.
And I mentioned this break-even point of 2043, but as I think we said, that does depend on a lot of things going right. It depends on the 13,000 jobs being created. It depends on the supplier jobs. All of this is sort of tied together. This is a terribly fast-paced world we live in, certainly in the world of business and in the world of technology. Do you have concerns that the amount of jobs that we're talking about right now could in fact be many fewer because of the rapid changes in technology?
No, actually, I think it's going to be just the opposite.
You think there'll be more?
I do. I really do. In our discussions with the company, I think this is just going to bring more opportunity to Wisconsin. We've seen it with other Wisconsin companies that we've invested in. Once they're here, once they've made a commitment here, then when they're looking to expand a line or looking to expand a business opportunity, they'll look to do it here in Wisconsin. And I think the numbers in the Fiscal Bureau report, and rightfully so, fairly conservative. I just don't think that the current models can adequately capture just how transformational that this ecosystem, this high-tech manufacturing ecosystem, it's more than just a manufacturing plant. I think that's the one thing I'd like to leave you and the viewers with. This is a high-tech manufacturing ecosystem that's not going to send out ripples in economic benefit to the state of Wisconsin. It's going to send out waves of economic benefit to Wisconsin. And as far as the break even, just last week, the state of Wisconsin was upgraded by Moody's Investor Service. Our bond rating was upgraded. They were fully aware of this deal. So that's a disinterested third-party observer. Well, not disinterested, they're very interested because they're interested in making sure that whatever commitments Wisconsin has, they can pay back. They knew about this deal, and we got an upgrade.
Let me have you address one final point, and you both heard this. You've been busy doing what you do and trying to put the finishing touches on this deal, but I'm sure you've read some of the criticism, and it sort of goes along the lines of Wisconsin has given away the store on this deal. Let me ask a very simple question. Could you have driven a harder bargain in the negotiations with Foxconn?
No, I don't believe so. We didn't meet the number that they asked for. That's the bottom line. And when we looked at it every step of the way, Scott and I have been involved in this from day one, and what we kept saying is we want a good deal for the state of Wisconsin. And ultimately, when we looked at it and we looked at the amount of capital expenditures and the commitment on the company's side relative to the employment, and all of the other things that go with it that you cannot quantify, we truly can sit here today and look at it and say that Wisconsin got a good deal for a lot of money. There's no doubt about it, but there's an incredible commitment on the part of the company, and the opportunity for the state of Wisconsin is limitless.
Secretary Neitzel, I'll give you the final word on that. Could we have gotten a better deal?
No, I think we got a good, our objective when we set out was to get a good deal for the state of Wisconsin. We got a good deal for the taxpayers of Wisconsin that's going to bring 13,000 high-paying jobs to Wisconsin and create economic benefit across the state for years to come.
It appears this will pass in the Assembly. Right now, it appears there's a good chance of it passing in the Senate. But strange things happen. What would be the message if, for some reason, this deal got bogged down and didn't happen? What would be the message about Wisconsin?
It's not going to happen, Mike.
It's not a thought you're entertaining.
I come with 40 years of banker experience, so I don't always look at things on the positive side, but I just don't see that happening. Every step of the way, every conversation that we have had, people are very positive about this, and they want to do the right thing for Wisconsin. So it'll get through the Assembly, it'll get through the Senate, because they want it. They want the right thing to happen for Wisconsin.
And you share that confidence, I assume.
Absolutely.
All right. Secretary Scott Neitzel, Secretary Mark Hogan, it's great to have you on the program today. Thanks very much for being with us.